On his well-chosen topic to start off the year. I am slightly in awe of two fantastic historians in this room today. They're actually rather nervous to offer any contribution, but in for a penny, in for a pound, I think that's really the only attitude here. You can't have an interest in history and not realise that discussions over why we study it, what we should study, inspire more vitriol amongst the historian community, more ink on the pages of our opinion magazines and newspapers than almost any other issue, I'm afraid to say. And the Honourable Member for Kingswood has set his topic commendably wide today, but in the end, rather than re-rehearse my undergraduate essays on why study history that I did for my Oxford preparations, I think I would rather focus perhaps on why we should study it, and perhaps also slightly on how we should study it. We all have a personal view over what history actually is, why we study it, why we learn it. To me, I find that after 10 years of studying it, it finally, just as I was about to leave university, taught me how to think properly. A useful lesson that I like to think I carried on with me into this place. Opponents may disagree. But also I think it's a study of the consequences of human nature. Now, history is not unique as a subject in being able to teach us how to think properly, how to form an argument, how to judge and assess pieces of evidence. Other topics can do that as well. But history brings, I think, a fundamental additional benefit, that it comes with a body of knowledge that allows us to understand why we are where we are. And I think that that is something that is fundamentally important. I realise that there are some who wish perhaps to make mischief, that you wish to somehow define the Conservative Party as a bunch of conservatives with a small c, obsessed by our narrative history, constantly seeking that golden thread. I have to say that doesn't really interest me in particular. I would far rather we focus on what really history should not consist of. I certainly have no desire to see children sitting in a classroom chanting their regnal dates as if they were the times table. It's like having a wardrobe full of coat hangers with no clothes hanging on them. I'm not sure I could recite the Kings and Queens of England with any great accuracy. Sir Lewis Namier rightly identified that elections were the locks on the great canal of British history, and he's right. But there's no point being able to recite every significant general election if you can't talk about the water that flowed through those locks, the changes that came with it. Indeed, I would love to see Sir Lewis Namier applying his comparative biography techniques to the current front benches of the government and the opposition, because I think it might show some very interesting comparisons compared to what we actually tend to read in the press occasionally. But nor should history just be about entertainment, about horrible histories, about blood and gore and who killed who in the Tower of London. Because whilst that's entertaining, what does it teach us? I'm not sure it teaches us much other than how to have fun, potentially. History is not about teleology, about a national story, about just a narrative, in my view. It's certainly not about emoting. I despair when I have students come down to visit the House of Commons who find that they've been asked to write essays about what it felt like to be a Roundhead or a Cavalier or a soldier in the trenches or this, that or the other, but have no idea of the context of what they would be asked to empathise. They didn't know why, if they were a soldier in the trenches, why they were there, what led them to be there, what was the end result. It was all about empathising. It was almost an excuse to go on a day trip to the Imperial War Museum, perhaps, I sometimes suspect. So history can be a useful tool at times. It shouldn't just be about great men and personalities. I hold my hand up as being guilty that I studied Weimar Germany for GCSE, for A-level, and my degree. By the time I took my degree, I could almost recite the name of every Reichstag member in 1932. That wasn't exactly helpful. It just showed that you end up as an anorak, knowing more and more about less and less. And that isn't particularly helpful. And what we admire in good history writing, or what we admire about a good history course at university, isn't necessarily what we should be admiring, I think, in a school syllabus. And often it's hard to throw off what we acquired in our later years compared to what we actually should be trying to achieve in our school system. I spent a very happy Christmas indulging myself in the 24-hour existence of Carpatho-Ruthenia, which lasted most of Boxing Day from my reading. But I would a fantastic piece of historical research from Norman Davies, but not, in my view, something that I would want to inflict upon a group of 11-year-olds.
Why not?
So the question then becomes, should we be compelling certain periods or topics upon a history syllabus? Do we believe that history has a didactic purpose? Well, I think it's fair to say that many people who are teaching history have strong views, often strong political views, and naturally part of what they want to communicate to their pupils is an enthusiasm for the topic and the period. I can't remember a single one of my history teachers who didn't allow a slight degree of political opinion to sneak out in whatever period they were teaching. That's, perhaps to be understood, perhaps, and not, in a way, not always a bad thing. But there are dangers in trying to use history teaching in school as a way to communicate values. And that's my big fear. I don't believe history, in the end, is about communicating values. It's about communicating skills. Mm-hmm. The only time I ever studied Anglo-Saxon history was in my first week at secondary school. And we spent a week trying to work out who was buried at Sutton Hoo. I think I came down in favour of King Redwald. I was probably wrong. We still have no idea, I'm sure. But that was the first and last time I ever studied Anglo-Saxon history. I've no desire to go back and read anything more about it, I have to say. But what that 1 week reminded me about was actually what we're trying to do is assess evidence, reach conclusions, construct an argument. And those are the basic and essential skills that we need, I think, to absorb when we are teaching history in the schools. I'll give way to the Honourable Gentleman.
Grateful to the Honourable Gentleman giving way, and the point he makes, very much support him on that. It's, I think, a fundamental basic point, looking at society at the moment, is literacy. And in terms of the failure that we've seen in literacy over the years, one thing which history does, does he agree with me, in terms it develops and it gives one an opportunity to develop a sustained argument, a lengthy argument, which then helps improve our literacy, which is absolutely important we do so.
I entirely agree with that comment. I think one of my great frustrations in life is I only actually discovered how to write an essay in my last term at university. Unfortunately, I was a bit late to fully enhance my learning experience during the whole time of my education. We do have to be careful, though, that we don't make our history lessons and our final exams in history, because that, after all, is what matters, I think, is what you test in the end, into some sort of quiz or some sort of multiple choice. And I have grave reservations sometimes about some A-levels. It is to my eternal shame, in a way, that I got a grade A at A-level politics, just walking in off the street and sitting the A-level politics exam. I failed to study the subject during my sixth form. I just thought I'd take it for the fun of it, and I thought I might get a grade D. It seemed a fun thing to do. I shocked both myself and my politics. And I had a politics at the school that I got an A. Largely because it was based entirely upon general knowledge, as far as I could make out. It was like, tick here when the last general election was. Well, that, wasn't exactly something you needed to study, in my view. But essentially, I think the skills that history teaches us are and should be made compulsory up to the age of 16. And I support entirely what my honourable friend is saying on that point. I think it is a tragedy that there are far too many children who miss out on the opportunity of studying history. And I think that we don't need to make history frightening or scary. We don't need to obsess about the cliches of the grand narrative of the golden thread of British history. I represent two seaside towns who, if we tried to comprise the whole of the British history, they wouldn't get to start till 1800. Because before 1800 there wasn't much built on Blackpool North and Cleveleys other than a few mud huts here or there. Or possibly 1730. The Honourable Stoke is pulling a face at me as though I'm getting it wrong. That would not surprise me. Nonetheless, what I find within Blackpool is the immense enthusiasm there is for local history. We have community heritage champions who are often older people who didn't have the chance to study history in the way that we would all perhaps like, but get really excited at the chance of trying to get new oral history techniques. We have a Jewish cemetery in my constituency, We have no Jewish community really anymore to speak of. But people are fascinated by this Jewish cemetery and what it tells them about the sort of people who used to be active in Blackpool in its heyday. It's a fantastic tool for local children to learn about the area they live in. So I'm a strong supporter of using local history as a way in to make history interesting for those who are studying it. But as ever, you can't just look at the baubles on the Christmas tree. I think there is no point teaching children about the things that interest them and entertain them unless they understand what those lock gates are on the canals of both British and European history. Until we understand, I'm just about to conclude so I won't give way if you don't mind, until we understand how it all links together, I don't believe that history will achieve the goal it should be setting itself. That does mean that we interest people, but it doesn't mean that we exclude them from fully understanding what it is about the country they live in that makes it what it is today.
Hear, hear.